Hey everyone, welcome to Decisions Lunch and Learn. It is Gregory, your opening act for Jared for this Lunch and Learn, and we are going to be taking questions now. Please feel free to post them in the chat. For those of you who have not seen, sorry, do not post them in the chat. Post them in the QA. I misspoke last time. Let me correct that now. Put them in the QA, and we have a new EST stand-up time, an additional time that is going to be starting at 2 p.m. and end at 3 p.m. Monday through Friday on business days. And that will be in addition to the one that we host from 9:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. So please feel free to attend that. And below here, we've, of course, advertised in DocBot. Highly recommend checking that one out. It's pretty nice. And those are the two major announcements. You guys know about the marketplace by now. You guys know that we got a YouTube channel for decision support. Both are great. And yeah, ready to start taking questions when you got them. Let me get the participants list up here, so I'm just ready to unmute people on the fly. And let me switch over to my decisions instance while the questions come in. There we go. All right, cool. Sorry, for some reason it just dropped this other stuff. Let me pull that up. There we go. So, don't really have anything major to talk about right now. Still
I'll
working on. Oh yeah,
I can do some time if you want, Gregory, until we get some questions.
sure, absolutely.
Yeah,
I'll stop sharing.
cool. Just one minute here. And for those of you just joining, like I said, feel free to interrupt us. We would like to be interrupted, but for now, what I'd like to do, real quick, just because it's fresh on the mind here, is talk about some of the new release stuff that we have coming down the pipeline. So we just launched 9.6, which seems like a uh, a big number considering I feel like 9 just came out. We did get a QA, setting up database connections and decisions and passing in a SQL statement that's using that database in Flow. Cool. We'll actually start there, Alexander, here in just about 30 seconds. But just so I can finish my thought, if you do have any, and I'll maybe talk about this a little bit later, um, but feel free to look through our decisions documentation site for our release notes for 9.6, because we do have a lot of awesome new features that are extremely helpful in 9.6 that haven't existed before. And a lot of UI changes that make things a lot simpler. So again, we'll kind of get moving on that here once we get through some actual questions, because if you come with questions, we want to come back with you answers. Cool. So Alexander asked a question in the chat about
Yep.
how can you go over setting up a database connection decisions and passing in a SQL statement and then using that database in a flow. Have any, you'd feel free to guide me, but I generally know where we should go, but
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be the same sort of thing. So we're going to be setting up integrations, configure. I believe it's going to be right above that, integrations, and then click on databases. From here, you're going to set up create connection at the top. This is where you put in either your database connection string or the credentials necessary to connect to the database. Um, Pardon me for just a moment. I'm going to drop for the meeting because of my screen. Give me just like 2 seconds, y'all. Okay.
yeah, I'll kind of pick up. Oh, you're back.
Yep, that was quick. So we'll hit create connection at the top. The one that you see there is the local connection that gets created against the database that Decisions is installed against. So you have to name this connection just for ease of access, and then you're going to specify the database type. Database type can vary between a lot of them. Even though Decisions has a limitation on the kind of databases you can run it against, it has to be a relational database like SQL or Postgres. Um, and maybe like an Azure DB with one of those particular setups. When you are connecting to an external database, you don't have those same restrictions, and you can set the database type to a whole bunch of different options there. I believe we are still sharing your screen, so I'll flip to mine if you'd like.
And then like I said, I'll hop back over when we do the 9.6 stuff.
You got it. All right, so y'all should be able to see my screen. I'm gonna navigate to it under integrations here system-wide and not particularly in the project, just so you can see it can be done both ways. Oh, my bad. Sorry, these are the local connection that is set up already. I would create at the project level. I apologize. Let me go back to that, which is on Lunch and Learn the 14th, which is actually on the 16th, and we will go under, I clicked the wrong one. Manage integrations, databases, create connection. I'm going to just call this test because I've already got that listed in there for some reason. And then here you can specify the database type. So as you know, you typically use one of these when you're installing decisions against it, but you can connect to external databases that are not necessarily ones that decisions can be installed against normally, such as an ODBC database, Azure Synapse, or these other options as you can see here. I'm just going to put in SQL so I can go over some of the credentials for this. And then I specify the server name, the database name, and if you're using Windows authentication for SQL, that is the Surface account that's running decisions also has authentication onto that SQL server. You can keep this box checked. Otherwise, you want to uncheck that and specify the database server admin name and password to be able to have permissions to access it. The server name would be whatever your hosted server is called. Database name is whatever the database is called. And then username and password, those are, well, whatever you set them to. Another option is that you can use a custom connection string instead. And without specifying the credentials individually, you specify the connection string to that database in here. Once you have that created, all right, I'm not going to create it right now, but once you have that created and we go into data structures here, you can then create a database integration to be able to fetch what you're looking for. On your case, you mentioned that you wanted to create a query, so I would add a query integration. Once you've set up that connection, you'll see it as an option down here, not just local connection anymore. You would select that connection. You can write the query here. You can specify parameters and then run it to make sure it works and save it. Once that gets created here, I'll make one right here. I like selecting from the accounts, which is in decisions, the entity account table. I'm going to run that. And now you can see that all the accounts are populated that are in this decision server. I'm going to save this. Oh, my bad. I do have to give that a name. I'll call it get accounts. So keep in mind, this query would be, get LNL accounts. Keep in mind that this query would be running against whatever database you specify here. So I'm going to save this. So we're on part 2 of the 2-part question right now, just so everyone's keeping track. And now if I go into my flows, let's create a new one, all right? I'll call it the get accounts flow. Scrolling under here, under integration, database, and then local connection is the database I'm connected to, but you would see your own database name pop up here that you specified. You would drop that down, and then you would just drag the step to run the query on here. You can specify parameters in the setup of the query so that you can pass in more inputs dynamically if you want to filter by certain criteria in your query, or maybe you want to even dynamically change what the table is that's being fetched. That'd be an interesting use case. So here, I don't want to limit the count. I'm going to ignore that. Actually, I don't know if it's going to run if I ignore that. We'll figure out. I'm just going to set this to constant. I'm going to limit this to 500 results, and we have something like 7. So debug this, and then voila. The query has run. And here are all the accounts. Alex, you should still be able to talk. Did that answer your first question?
Yeah, it did answer my question on how to connect to the database and how to also pass a query. So that's great. And so when I actually run the query, is that going to, so whenever I connect to it, it'll only pull the data from that database that my query pulled, right? and then I'm
That's
able,
correct.
you know, I'm
Oh
sorry,
yeah.
massage how I wanted decisions, correct?
Right, right. So that would only pull the thing. Let me give you an example real quick. If I go back to that data structure and edit that query real quick. So I can specify something like where uh, email address equals, and then give me just a moment. I'm going to put at email. When I do that, you'll see that a parameter pops up here. Um, the syntax for creating parameters against a SQL database is by using the at symbol. So by putting at email, I can now specify a default value. Let's say it's admin at decisions.com. And now when I run this, it's not populating the parameter by default, but when it does in the flow, it should. Let me make sure I'm not having any spaces here. Admin at decisions.com. Okay, sounds good. Let's save that object reference on. Excuse me. Hmm. Well, that is an error I was not expecting. I'll be honest. I'm not 100% sure what's going on with that. I think we'll figure that out in a moment. So I'm going to exit out of this. We'll edit that again, figure out what's going on. And then where I'm just going to say is active. It might actually just be active. Why don't we figure that out? Let's do our due diligence here. Account ID, archived, can use. Let's use can use portal. That's a great one. Where can use portal equals, and then I'll do at bool for boolean. Oh, it may not like that. Booly. And we will set the default value to true. Hit OK, save it, give it a run, give it a save. And now we have a specified criteria for our get accounts. And now I can pass that in dynamically in the flow, whether I want it to be true or false, right? I can set it as constant if I want to, or maybe I want to pull from flow data where I've got something else that determines that fetch criteria. In this one, I'm going to set it to false because I set it by default to true. So if I debug this, you'll see the can use portal is false. It's only going to pull accounts that have that particular field set. So yes, that's how you use it in the decisions platform. You can connect to any sort of type of database that I can't say any sort of type, but multiple different types of databases, even ones beyond the capabilities of what you can install decisions against. So that is how that functions. You
So
mentioned your, oh yes,
I also want to know. So you set up the table first by connecting it to the database, right?
that's correct. So I go under integration, databases, and then I would create that connection. Once I do that, that shows up here as another connection option in the database type. And when I go to create that data structure against the database integration, and I pick one, I'm going to pick a table integration this time. When I drop down select connection, it will show that option here. I don't have an external database set up currently, which is why I didn't make one on call, but that is the process to do that.
Okay. Now, when is that data like? Is it whenever this runs? Is it gonna refresh the data, or do I need to set up some kind of refresh in decisions?
That depends upon how that database is operated. So
Mhm.
and the kind of query that you're running. So for example, that database that you're connecting to is some independent entity that's set up. So maybe you have a company directory that you're trying to connect to and bring, information about particular accounts and their functions or roles.
Mhm.
If that database is updated regularly, then when you run the decisions query, it will be updated regularly
Okay.
as far as a select. You can update that database if the database allows for updates from the particular authentication of that user. So in the database connection over here, when you're setting it up, you specify server name, database name, and then you have the authentication, right? If the user doesn't have writing permissions to be able to change stuff in that database, then whatever integration you make with decisions won't allow you to do that.
Okay, so if my database doesn't allow, like, let's say it doesn't allow live connections or something like of that nature, would I be able to possibly store the database or store a table inside of decisions and have it update on a schedule?
Interesting. So what you're talking about is basically running a scheduled job that would make a call to an external database. That external database would then have information brought in via a flow and then compared against a table that is in decisions and then update that table manually or update the table based upon criteria. That is absolutely doable. Yeah, that is something that can be set up. You would first set up the connection like you would here, because this is the way that Decisions knows how to talk to that external server. So you absolutely would need to set up this in some sort of way. And the user that's running that is not necessarily a Decisions user that has the permissions, but again, either a database account that has access, or if your Windows account, the service account that's running Decisions has access to that database, you can just use Windows authentication. But whether or not you can access that database, like the permissions on that, is beyond the scope of Decisions and more about what the database itself allows. Decisions will connect to the database if it can reach it, if it has permissions. And then your process would be running a fetch query, basically a select from that external database, right? And that would be done in a flow. And then you would have some processor logic after here that would run against maybe a fetch entities. Maybe you're storing the decision stuff in an entity table and then start comparing the two with further logic in the flow to determine what in decisions should be updated, maybe with a save entities, right? Or I think it's called update entities, not subdate. Yeah, update entities to be able to update the stuff in decisions based upon what's pulled on here. And then in the scheduled job itself, which you can set up by going to jobs and events, scheduled jobs, you would then create a scheduled job, update data, pick the flow, which in our case was the get accounts flow, determine how often you want that to run, and then further specify that once I've selected one. So if I select weekly schedule, I'll specify down here which day I want to run that on every week, or maybe it's an hourly one and you want to run it. Maybe you want to run it on the daily. Maybe you want to have a time span schedule where every so and so amount of seconds, hours, minutes you run this. But this is how you would configure that to run that flow that fetches and compares and updates those entities in decisions based upon what it finds in that database.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize on mute. That's good to know. I appreciate that. And also the scheduled job thing I also needed to know now. So that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, and you said you were curious about the version 9.6 features. We do have those updated. I know Rob was just going over those, and I'm sure that we can either get something in the chat with a link to the doc site, and we'll have a video coming out on it too that'll go over it. So we'll make sure that we can get you that information so that you can follow that and take a look at it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll send it out, or I'll probably talk about it in later lunch and learns, but for sure I'll send it out. I have a video that's about to go live over the new parts. I was going to share stuff before there was questions, but now we've got a couple questions. I'd rather just address the questions that came in. But like I said, I'll for sure send something out here. I'll send it to you specifically, Alexander. Yeah, we have another question from Grant. It's the question is, I have a form that includes an image of a signature displayed on it. How can I save the signature to a database? Should this be handled through an active form flow, or can it be managed within the existing flow where my form is placed? It depends on exactly what you mean. I'll kind of unmute you here and confirm. But are you talking about you have a signature pad on a form somewhere?
Yeah, so what it is it's a request, right? And they have to sign off. However, what the problem I'm running into is so once they hit sign changes, it captures their signature from a database, and then it puts the picture on the form as just an image, like it replaces it with an image of their signature. Um, and then after that, I want to take that signature and put it back into the request database. That way it captures their signature back in there. So we have a database of just signatures, and then we have a database for the request, or I mean, I guess a table. And I'm just trying to figure out how can I save or get output of that image after they sign it.
Yeah, yeah, a couple options, and Greg, feel free to step over me speaking incorrectly. It should come out of that form, or it could come out of that form as file data. So then you could use some steps to convert that file data to file reference and store it in a number of ways. But again, a lot of this is going to really kind of depend on what your goal is. Like if you just don't mind just storing it in decisions, you're probably one of the quicker ways is going to be to, is that signature loading as an image, or is it loading on the signature pad? So they click a button that says sign now, it fetches their signature from a database, loads it on the form. Is that an
Yeah,
image, or is that a signature pad?
it is an image. I have like a add update signature button, and then it gives them a signature pad. But if their signatures are in the database, they can just hit sign, and then it
Nice.
updates the image with their signature from the database.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool design pattern, honestly. Yeah, I think when you fetch that image, you're probably going to have the ability to output it as file data. You can convert it to file reference and then store it, in a number of ways. You can store it attached to it as extension data. We have a project, the I-9 project, where it's something similar, where they'll have a PDF that loads and they'll attach a signature. You add the image to the PDF and then you save the PDF as an entity in a folder of a case, I believe. Well, obviously that's a little bit of a bigger build than what you were trying to do. I see Greg is kind of rolling here. Yeah, Greg, I think you want to take over if I missed something.
Yeah. So you're going to be taking a signature from external database. So in your case, you'll have some sort of external database call, right? Something that's integrated into decisions under integration, just kind of like we were going over before. Integration, database, and you'll have one that's connected to be able to pull that information. Now, the way that this is updated, I don't have an external database I'm connected to, so I'm going to run a static image. And this is basically what's going to populate on a document. All right, so let's say document. Actually, let's just call this image. I'm just going to call this image, and I'm going to set this to file data. Now, a quick question, Grant. Are you adding this signature to another document, or do they just need their signature displayed like on the form after they click that?
It's kind of both. Eventually it will get added to a document, which I have done that before, but as far as like getting their signature, like it it just grabs it from a table, and then it when they hit sign, it updates that image on the form with their signature. And that's how that runs.
Okay, okay. Give me just a moment. I am pulling up. Where did it go? Where did it go? Pardon me. I'll have this in just a moment. Actually, I think that will work too. That that's a PDF. We'll see if that works. So I'm going to drag this over real quick. So instead of this being a create data, this would be a database call, right? And then it would pull that information, and then we can use that to set a particular document viewer, set form control, which is a little bit lower. And then here, I'm going to pick from the flow data. I'm going to pick form data, and then I want the, where is it? Document viewer. There we go. I'm going to click on that, and then it's going to take in a list of file data, right? So I'll select that from my flow, the image, update that. Let's give that a save, and let's confirm if this works. Oh, I do need a name for this. Update image. So my sign button is just a raise event button. It's just an event button. And all that does is when you click it, it kicks off an active form flow. That is all that button is designed to do. So you can tie an active form flow to that. Let's run this in a flow and see if this works. So we'll run that, show form, pass it in, pick existing, signature form. And now I don't want any of that set already, so I'm just going to set that to ignore. We're going to do that already. So let's debug this, see if this works. So I'm going to hit sign, and yeah, it populates it already with the image that we have set up. So in this one, it's a PDF of a project that I'm working on. But here they can have their own signature pad that can take over instead. And then we could have a system in that active form flow. Let's say you hit sign again, right? That dynamically checks whether or not this is empty. If it is empty, then it won't put it here. If it's not empty, it overrides it and puts it here instead. Does that make some sense?
Yeah, that does make sense.
Now, as far as saving it to a database, you can do that in an active form flow. If they have a new image here, you could have a path that goes down this path over here, right? So you fetch the image, right? You check if such an image exists from this person. If it does exist, set the control value, you're done. If it does not exist, if no results return, then instead they can maybe have that control enabled to prompt them for a signature, saying, hey, we did not find your signature, please sign here. That's the value. Update the database based on the same ID that came to fetch it here, right? And puts it into that, all in one active form flow. The only things that you can't do in active form flows are run asynchronous steps like forms or delay steps. So any of that stuff can be run in active form flow just fine.
Okay, yeah, because that's what I was trying to figure out. Because as soon as they hit approve and it moves on to like the next person in the chain, I wanted it to take that signature and put it in the database. So it would be done through an active form flow is what you're thinking?
You can do it that way.
Okay.
That is also a perfectly reasonable way is if they hit sign and nothing shows up and they have to output the signature pad here, you can then update that with like a save entities or like a different step that you have down here that's an update query instead of a select query, right? So you would update it based on the parameters, and then the only thing that gets passed in is the file data, because the output of this right here, the output signature, is of type signature pad. But if I go into this, I'm just going to create file data and show you what I'm talking about real quick.
Okay.
It doesn't like that. Maybe it's cap sensitive. There we go. This is the output signature. Save that. So instead of that being a constant, here we go. Wait. Instead of that being a constant, we're going to select from flow data. Now, oh, sorry. I'm going to build data. My bad. Because the way this works is it has a contents, a file name, an ID, and a tag. That's what file data is composed of. Contents is the list of bytes. File name is a string. ID is a string. Tag's a string. These are the two most important things to make sure it gets saved properly. ID and tag are less important. So if I were to try to map in the contents from my output signature, you'll see there's two things that happen. There's the JSON, and then there's the raw data of the signature. Okay, getting the raw data and passing it into the list of bytes, we'll save that. And then the file name, you can pull that dynamically from this signature, right? From this form. Maybe they have a name output or an email, and you can pass that in here, or you can just set it to be a constant if you want to have some naming convention for how signatures are named inside the database. And then you would pass that into here, save it into the database as file data, and there you go.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And that was my problem. My form didn't have an output. It just has inputs. So that was what I was trying to figure out, because yours right there has the output sig, and mine doesn't
Uh-huh.
even have an output category. So that's what I got to figure out now, is how I guess that works.
Yeah, it's a signature pad. Did you have a signature pad before?
No, he said he was loading on an image.
Oh,
So
okay. No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, that signature pad is what lets them sign and automatically creates an output as long as you have your process set to, optional required. If you set it to not used, then you'll see very quickly that that is no longer an output.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So you want to confirm that's also going down the right outcome path here. I'll set that to optional because in some cases their signature will fill and you don't want them to fill that up. So instead of making that required and throwing a validation, I'm just going to make it optional and you still get the output.
So can you output a signature then? Or not a signature, I mean a image from that form?
You output a signature and you create the image from that signature. The
Gotcha.
signature type is composed of just a list of JSON and the raw bytes that make up the image. So you can save it as a file data by just building on it, passing in the contents, which is exactly what the signature is the contents, right? And then some name to store it as file data in the database.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. Any follow-ups to that one? Anything else I can clarify, or is that making sense?
I think that makes sense. I gotta just rework it a tiny bit just to make it fit that. I think it will work.
Yeah, no worries. And okay, if you need more help, next week we're hosting Lunch and Learns again, so we'll be glad to jump on if you need a little bit more tweaking with that. We'd be glad to assist. Or at least answering questions. We can't show your instance here. Privacy reasons, but you get that. Okay. That is all the questions that we currently have. If anyone has any more, of course, that'd be great. But yeah, I can see if we can find that here, I'm gonna exit out of this. Y'all can still see my screen, right? Okay. So, I'm a bit cluttered here as far as my environment's concerned. One thing that I do want to show, and this is because I think in version 9, it's not as easily understood how to add and remove dashboards to things. So I want to go over that real quick. All right. It's just a quick little intro here. So here I've made my own travel request dashboard, and then I'm going to add one more page to that as well by right-clicking it, hitting add page, and I am going to select the company landing page. I'll pick that, save that, and now I've got both pages attached to this public folder, right? Now, if I want to reorder them, you do that by going to the page that you want, drop down all, and select edit page data. Here you specify the order starting at 0 and going up. So right now, this has an order of 0, and they have an order of 0 by default. And the company landing page also has an order of 0, which means they are sorted alphabetically. So if I want the company landing page to be later and people, when they first click on this folder, get taken to the travel request page, I would set this order to 1, save it, and you'll see it flip-flops up here. So now you can see whenever I would click on public folders, I get taken to the request travel page instead. If I want to remove one of my pages without just, straight up deleting the page from here, maybe I want to use it later. The way I would do that is by going to folder view, clicking these three dots right here, and then hitting change on the report. So this is just going to show all folder entities, but in our case, we want to show all folder items with hidden items. As soon as I pick this, both page data types are going to show up here. If I want to remove the request travel page, I would right click it, go to more, and then there's going to be a delete page data. I will confirm that. And now you can see up here, I only have the company landing page. If I go back to the folder, I still only have the company landing page, but both of my pages are intact here to be reused wherever we want. So just a quick little tutorial on how to do that in case that ever comes up in your building. Still not seeing any more questions. And no one else has joined since then, so I think I might give it the countdown. So we'll be wrapping this up in 3, 2, and 1. Thank you all very much for coming to our last Lunch and Learn of the week, and we look forward to seeing you all next week.